In this video, I will show you how you can build a Dutch roof, provide you with an example of it anyway. This one here has a 4-foot setback, and that would be 4 foot from the face of the garage wall to the face of the wall underneath the Dutch overhang here. Fairly simple once we know how it's done. You get a picture of it, get some ideas. You got a hip coming up to a double rafter. This is going to be a supporting rafter. It's going to support some type of a ledger. And I am going to make a couple more videos and put some links to them at the end to provide you with a few different ways to do this section right here. It might provide you with a little more support, especially if you have a wider span and a longer setback. View of the hip with the jack rafters here. And here we have the fascia board and the outlookers. Now I kind of drew a couple different ways you could do this because I don't know how much structural strength you're going to be taking out of the supporting rafters here by notching outlookers into them. So, you reduce this down from a, if the engineer requires a 2x8 and you cut a 1.5 notch in it, you're almost down to a 2x6. That might not make them happy. So I'm kind of just basing this off of what I learned from floor framing, where you can notch into the first 1/3. You cannot notch into the middle third of the framing of the floor joists. And so if that's the case, you probably aren't going to want to get carried away and put an outlooker down here. You're going to want to keep it up here somewhere and maybe just one of them instead of two like we see over here. Here's the ledger in the back, and it's not uncommon to make this a little larger. If you have a 2x8 ledger here, use the supporting ledger in the back or the supporting brace here as you just make it a little longer and give you a little more strength. So this is a 2x8 I believe, and a 2x10. You can always put a 2x8 and a 2x12 back here also. A view of how it's connected together and how the supporting ledger is positioned in between the two supporting rafters. And of course you can nail this from both sides, get some nice nailing. View from below. And you can see here where this ledger right here just simply notches or is shaped to fit underneath the rafter. View without the fascia board, we can see the notched ridge. You're going to have to notch it, otherwise it'll be sticking below the fascia board. Seen that plenty of times. And the ledger right here, only going 2 inches bigger. I was talking to my dad about this, and he was saying they used to use this so they could get some backing for the stucco or the siding that was going to go on here. But once you, run this up with the sheathing, I'm going to show you a picture of it here in a little bit. You're going to see there really isn't that much backing. You're really not getting a lot of backing, but you still are getting the structural strength or the support from using a wider board here. Instead of a 2x8, use a 2x10. On the other side, I figured I'd show you a different way. You can maybe just put some blocks in here. And this might not provide you with a lot of support, but after you put the roof sheeting on, you could always nail into this. Might give you, between this and the sheathing, might provide you with a little support. And of course, you could always change the direction. Instead of running them flat, run them on edge here, and then maybe try using a strap. Put a block on each side. And I don't know how long of a strap you would really need. If you ran a strap from here to here, the main point is right here. So I don't think this would have to be a very big strap, in other words. Let's go ahead and throw some sheathing on there. Pretty self-explanatory. Framing would be the most difficult to explain. This piece of plywood is going to go underneath the fascia board here. This sheathing can go over it. Just going to kind of whip through this, give you an idea what it looks like. Let's take away the rafters. See here where this is going to be a little more complicated to cut this section in. And you can always put a block underneath here. I don't know if it'd really be a big deal. Not going to be a lot of weight under here. Some roofing shingles or tile, whatever you're going to be using. And notching it around, of course, one of the supporting rafters. And take it away there, give you an idea what you're nailing into. See what the bottom would look like here. Of course, this is where we have the notched outlookers. Might be a no-no, as I was suggesting. And of course here the rafter, the barge rafter fascia board is sitting on top of the sheathing. And that's probably not going to make the roofer happy. You're going to have to leave some type of a gap. And I like to leave at least 1.5 inches on composition shingles. You know, it doesn't have to be tight. This rafter does not need to sit on top of the shingles. And actually what I do when I cut this is I have the rafter a little longer and I just grab my saw and run it along the bottom here, set it on top of the sheathing to where it's 1.5 inches, gives me 1.5 inches gap. I run the saw along there and gives them plenty of room for the shingles to go under. So the shingles here will go under this and then over this. Here's another video in the series on garage roof framing. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going around and showing you about this particular video because I'm going to make another video after this. So the next video I make will show you how to build this particular roof, or the process that how I would build it at least. So let's go ahead and take a look at the hip roof. Now remember, this is a 20-foot by 20-foot garage. So the hips are going to meet in the center on a perfectly square building. So here are our hips. And the corner. So kind of take a look. We got the jack rafters, fill rafters. And then we have little trusses here. So here's a little truss with a longer rafter for our jack rafters here. And then on this side, we have different rafters. You can see here that the bottom cord, or the ceiling joist, basically goes all the way across. Now I have a single truss here, and I just put that in to give you an idea. This is probably not going to be common, this one here. Probably going to have a double truss. We'll see on the other side here. So another view of the single truss. And of course I have my little nails going in here. I used to block these if they required them, but sometimes they didn't provide us with specifications, and I used to just in-nail the truss in there if it was a single truss. And of course the double, this is going to be referred to as a girder truss. Now this one here is going to support a little more weight. Now I also left this. I've seen them like this before, but this isn't going to be very common. Most of the time the rafter tail is cut off, and I'll show you that in a second here. Another view of the rafters. And of course, these rafters here, or the tops of these trusses here, they're going to sit on top of the girder truss most of the time. And this is going to provide them with additional support. Otherwise, the rafter might need to have been a 2x6 if it wasn't supported here. So I hope that makes sense. And of course, here's the girder truss that is usually just two trusses nailed together. And the rafter tail isn't going through here. And of course, that's to keep everything uniform. You have a single. You don't want a double in here, even though I've seen that plenty of times. So that's it for this roof here. Here is another one of the two-car garage roof framing videos, and thought I would do something a little different here with a double roof. And I really don't know what this design is, so feel free to chime in and share an opinion. I will call it the double roof, maybe even a stackable double roof. And I'm going to provide you with a couple of different options here. So here you can see where we have the fascia board come through, and on the back I'm going to do it a little different here and provide you with two other ways to finish this, including one where the fascia board could be nailed to the wall framing studs to provide some cantilever support here. And in some cases you might even be able to get rid of the lookouts if this isn't going to be very long. And by very long, that would really depend upon whether or not there's going to be any snow on the roof. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my videos, I'm going to go ahead and provide you with a few details to look at, and then we're going to take the roof apart. And of course we will put it back together. But I think it works better for most when explaining something to see what it actually looks like and then take it apart and put it back together. Now let's go ahead and focus on how this is framed here. And I'm using a 2x4 with a 2x4 ridge. You can always use a 2x6 or even a larger rafter, depending upon how the ceiling underneath is going to be finished. And if you noticed, I went ahead and stretched the ledger out a little longer so that I could provide additional structural support to the fascia board. And I did this on both sides of the front. And you could even do this in the back where the fascia board was cut and didn't continue all the way up. And of course you can always mix and match some of the stuff that you see in the video that might work better on other sections. And for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, I am not a structural engineer, and this is only meant to provide you with a model of something that can be built. However, you might want to contact a structural engineer in your area to verify any of the information in this video, including lumber sizes. For example, I'm using 2x8 for my roof rafters. I have a 4x12 beam and a 4x12 beam here. And for example, this garage header might need to be larger, or this section of the roof might need to be redesigned to make it work in your area. And that might depend upon whether or not you have a snow load or not. And how I figured the placement of the beams was simply divide the front length of the building into 3 sections. However, you don't need to do that. You can put these beams wherever you want to. And again, the location of these beams might also require you to use larger beams or even smaller ones in some cases. So here you can see where we have a 20-foot wide garage, 2-car garage, and if we divide this into 3 sections, we're going to have 6'8". However, you could divide it into quarters, but of course the one thing you couldn't do would be to divide it into half, because that would provide you with a regular roof. And now that we have torn it apart, let's go ahead and start putting it back together so that you can see the construction process. And even though you don't have to follow this all of the time, you might be able to make some changes here and there. So here we've built our wall on top of our structural support beams, and I won't be providing you with any measurements. However, if a group of you, for example, if I get 20 requests in the comment area to provide you with measurements, then I will do so. But if I only get 1 or 2, then that probably isn't going to happen. I've been trying to figure out what type of videos my viewers want to see, and that hasn't been working. So I'm probably going to end up making most of the videos I feel like making, or at the very least try to make more of the videos I see that are working. Now there is one thing I left out when taking apart the garage, and that would be the rafter ties. You're going to need rafter ties at the top, but you might not need them at the bottom. And I didn't put any collar ties in here because this roof isn't very big. However, you might also need to install collar ties. And of course, the rafter ties are used to prevent the walls from spreading out as weight is applied to the top of the roof and trying to force it down. So I would definitely put them at the top, but usually the beams provide you with enough support to prevent it from spreading in this direction at the bottom. And again, I'm using the word usually, which might also mean hopefully, but might not mean really. So again, check with your local building authorities so that your house doesn't fall down. And of course we have gable studs. We got two different sets of them. The two on this side would match, and then this one here would match, and of course it would match with the other side. And you might need to space these out differently. They might need to be closer together or even spaced a little further apart. And the locations of them might need to be changed if you're going to be installing any gable vents or would be looking for a particular design with the gable vents. Next up, let's go ahead and install the fascia board. Not too difficult. And of course, this video will eventually become part of a playlist of videos I've already made on a variety of different two-car garage designs with a breakdown like I'm showing you in the video here. Now, another thing I need to point out, and that is that you might need to install larger plywood. And of course, we did that on the other side. 2 foot is usually the minimum width of a piece of roof sheathing. And if that's the case, then you will need to cut this one and this one to make it work. And if not, then definitely do what you did on the other side to save a few dollars. And that brings us to the end of this video. In this video, I will provide you with an example of what a 2-car garage, approximately 20 foot by 20 foot, would look like with a truss roof on it. And there is the truss right there. The truss is an individual engineered unit with basically has a ceiling joist or a rafter tie with rafters basically built in it, and it will sit on 2 bearing points, and that will be the exterior walls, and it will have blocks in between them on the bottom and on the top. And I used a little larger block, used a 2x6 on the top. You can use a 2x4, but I'm throughout this video series on garage roof framing, I want to provide you with different ideas and different, like for example, the first one that I did on a regular gable roof had a plumb cut. This one here has a square cut for the fascia board on this side. And of course it's using 2x6 blocks. Fascia board has a 12-inch overhang from the face of the gable end and a 24-inch overhang, and this would be a horizontal line or a level line coming off the face of the framing to the end of the fascia board at the top. Gable truss is usually going to have some studs in it. You can see where it's a different type of truss than the regular truss, and this will be used for the walls. And I guess you can always order your trusses without a gable truss and make your own, because basically this is something that could be built on your own on the job site, where the trusses here you might have a harder time doing. The blocks, again, 2x6, because you have room here. If I didn't have room, if this was a different design, let's say for example the webbing was back a little farther, then I would have to use a 2x4 for sure. And the 2x6 blocks, you know, like again I said, they might not be necessary. I just kind of threw them in there. The truss manufacturer should provide you with all the information and really all the blocks that you need for your truss roof framing. This is a sway brace and can be less than a 45-degree angle. I wouldn't have it more than a 45-degree angle. Wouldn't have it like a 60-degree angle. But it could be a 30-degree angle and going to the next truss. But wanted to point out that this needs to be cut a little bit lower so that it's not sticking up. We can see here where this one here is sticking up above the framing because I cut it even with the top here, or drew it in that way. But you can see that these braces will need to come down a little bit. And same thing with the blocks. If you look at the block right here, the block is down. It's not at the top here. It's not at the peak. It's at the peak where the blocks would meet the plane of the roof, where the plane of the roof would come in. Plywood, you don't want to be having the plywood sticking up there. You are going to need this would be, what would this be? A brace again. And I usually just put a 1x4 down with 1/16 D-nail in it. You can use a 2x4 16s. You can always use this with 8 D-nails too. And these braces here actually just keep the trusses evenly spaced. And you can always put 2 of them in. Instead of running one right down the center, you could have them in the thirds. You could have one over here and one over here somewhere. And that is it. Hopefully that is enough information for you to understand or get a better understanding of what a garage would look like, the framing with a truss roof. Here is another one of our 2-car garage roof framing tutorials, or should I say example. I am not going to show you how to build the roof here, just show you what it would look like for those of you interested in building something like this, or should I say framing it. I'm not going to go over all the siding and the electrical and roofing either. So here we have a gambrel roof with a 24 and 12 pitch on the sides, and then a 6 and 12 pitch at the top, and a large open area to store stuff. Now, if you have something like this, you can create a barn if you want to. You can have doors on each side. You can have doors on one side. You can always fill these in with gable studs, both sides, and then cut an access hole in the center, and even put a pull-down stairway in it also. And another thing you can do, if the truss manufacturer would allow it, will be to put additional floor sheathing on each side here for additional storage. And again, that would you need to check with the manufacturer to verify that. Keep in mind that this is just an example of the framing. I've seen this before and thought I would make one, but yours might look a little different depending upon the size of the garage. This is a 20-foot by 20-foot garage here. And let's go ahead and remove the floor sheathing. Like I said, you could cut an access hole into any one of these bays here. Or if you needed a wider access hole, you could design it accordingly. Take a look at the fascia board going around. The bottom piece is going to be shaped here. And then these are going to have a 1x spacer behind it. Now, you don't have to put the 1x spacer in there, but I like to put it in there because it gives me a place where I can put the sheathing underneath the fascia board to provide some type of an overlap so that the water won't get trapped behind the siding. And of course, here you can see where I shaped the bottom of the fascia board. And we have our blocks in here. And this one here, I didn't miter this. You can always miter this joint if you wanted to get fancy. But here I just kind of lapped it over the edge of the fascia board. And of course you can see the 1x or 3/4 inch thick material that I have behind here. And again, like I said, you can slide your lap siding, you can slide your lath for your stucco paper, or the plywood for your siding, whatever you're going to be using on your garage. View of the framing there. We have blocking at each one of the breaks here to provide nailing for the roof sheathing perimeter, basically. The blocks here, and I think you're going to be able to get your diaphragm nailing by nailing into the fascia board and then nailing the fascia board into the blocking there. And then these blocks right here might need to be shaped at the top, but I don't have them shaped. They're nice and flat. You're still going to be able to get some nailing there. Ridge blocks, again for the diaphragm nailing. And the roof trusses are spaced 24 inches on center in this example. Row of blocks on the other side. Top view. Now let's go ahead and remove the walls below, give you an idea what it would look like from underneath. And you can kind of see here where we basically, what we have is a floor framed system where, let's just say we have 2x12s at the bottom for our bottom cords. And it's just like a floor that's attached to the roof truss. You know, there are other ways to build this, and I will be providing you with more of them in future videos. And if for whatever reason I have not made another video within 6 months or a year, and you're looking forward to seeing it, or a different type, learning more about Gable roof framing, feel free to leave a comment in the comment area, or email me a picture of something that you might have seen. And I do have to point out that even though I'm not suggesting that this particular design will be used everywhere around the world, I can't say that. I can say, and this is just getting brutal, I'm starting to see some horrible stuff on YouTube, and you're going to have to watch out for that. If you go through a professional roof truss manufacturing company who actually provides engineering advice on the roof trusses, and your local planning department, building department approves this stuff, you're going to be fine. But if you just copy something off the internet and build it, you could be in for one painful experience. So I cannot tell you how many, I wouldn't be saying anything if I didn't go to these channels and read some of the comments and say, oh, this is awesome, I'm going to build something like this. Hey, if I was going to the channel and it said, man, this doesn't look safe, I'm not building it, I wouldn't say anything. But I'm not seeing that. I see a lot of people that are getting a little carried away, professionals that know what they're doing, that give you the illusion that they know what they're doing when they might not actually be providing you with good structural engineering information to build something that isn't going to fall down in the future.